Please remain seated. The show will begin in 3, 2...
Like a Hellcat.
Hi, I'm FandomTraveller87.
Want to hear a ghost story?
Two decades ago, there was a young boy named Sam Phyllis, who was just 13 years old when him and his mother, who worked as a nurse, moved from Detroit to the countryside of Massachusetts. Sam was an average, normal kid, a bit of a nerd, who liked science and literature of all kinds. He was a bit of an outcast because he had a rather unique yet strange gift. And, well, he kept it as a secret from everyone because he was afraid that everyone would make fun of him. Developed at the age of 6, Sam had always had this uncanny strong ability, a sixth sense where he would see and hear things that no one else could. Sam felt very alone because he believed that nobody would understand him. This made Sam very depressed, and this would cause him to withdraw, even avoid his own mother whenever possible. Him and his mother never did have a good relationship. His mother, Paula, as mentioned before, who worked as a nurse, she wasn't a very nice person. She was far from it. Sam's mom was a raging alcoholic who always took out her frustrations and grief out on her own son. Oftentimes, Sam's mother would work at a local hospital in every town that they lived in until 3 o'clock in the morning. Then she would drive to a bar closest to her job, get heavily drunk, and then drive home intoxicated, and sometimes she would beat her son severely, even without a reason. Sam was terrified of his mother. Ever since his father's death, 2 years before, in which Sam's father, Rick, died in a fatal car accident in which his head was severely removed from his body during a collision as his body went through the windshield. It was indeed very graphic, and Sam had witnessed it. Sam often blamed himself because he felt responsible, like as though maybe he distracted his dad. So his mother would never make him forget it, would always beat him down, always make him feel like it's his fault, even though it wasn't. Sam was very insecure. And you know what's even stranger is that his mother didn't even cry at his dad's funeral. But Sam couldn't hold back a tear. There were plenty of times where Sam was by himself. He would be in his room, asleep, but sometime during the night, around midnight till about 2 o'clock in the morning, he would experience these very disturbing and god-awful night terrors, where a monster would be lurking around in his closet, trying to claw its way out. Sam would always hear it, growling and calling out his name. Sam would always keep the closet door locked, of course, and always had a nightlight on so he would feel safer in his own room. That's the way that it always was. Sometimes Sam would toss and turn around in his bed, and he would sometimes peer out from underneath the covers of his bed. Sometimes he would be soaked in sweat, his pajamas drenched, and he would be sometimes even motionless, as stiff as a corpse, not daring to move an inch. Sam wanted so badly to cry out to his mother, but he sometimes couldn't even find the words. He couldn't speak. Sometimes he would clench his teeth and tightly close his eyes until once he would stop praying, the noises would stop. But that was never the end. It always continued. Mostly throughout the majority of his life, where sometimes even when he would leave the house, he would always feel these invisible eyes just locked on him, watching him even from afar. And sometimes he would just get this cold chill running up his spine, feeling this cold, clammy hand on his left shoulder. Sometimes his nose would even bleed whenever he just sensed that he wasn't alone. And sometimes when people would see Sam out on the streets, even at school, they would just look at him like he was crazy. Sam did at least have one friend at some point. An old man named Phil Gillis that lived right next door to him in a bungalow. And Phil was a southern man who was a bit of a smoker, not much of a social butterfly, yet he would often invite Sam over for lemonade, and sometimes Phil would take Sam fishing out into the woods. It was just their way of bonding. One day, Sam came across this old, rotting house that looked like it hadn't been lived in the last 50 years. So Sam got very curious, and he approached Phil while they were having a conversation on the porch swing. And Sam asked him, "Do you know anything about that place?" Phil was hesitant. His face turned milk white for a moment, and he sort of shivered. He was reluctant, but somehow he knew that he could trust Sam. And Sam also trusted him. See, Phil was really Sam's only safety net in his life, so they felt like though they could confide in one another. Phil, in hesitation, responded with, "There was a young girl, a beautiful girl in her 20s, that married an older man by the name of Sam Rockwell Kingswood, who built that house about half a century ago. He was a handsome, rich oil tycoon, in which this town is named after. And they had a rather happy marriage for quite some time, until one day her husband went completely mad, and that woman was never seen or heard from again. No one really knows why. Rumors circulated around town like wildfire, just sort of spread around a bit, and rumors just kept on going. It was often speculated that he killed his wife out of a jealous rage, because she gained a bit of a reputation for being a rather vain person, always caring more about her own self-image than she did him, and she would often flirt with other men to get attention. Sometimes she would prance around wearing these provocative dresses, and would always kiss other men on the cheek, even some of his own colleagues, and this made her husband very angry. Though, contrary to some belief, Phil paused briefly, taking a sip from his glass of lemonade, and puffing a ring of smoke from his cigar before continuing. Her friends from high school that she was close with, they said that she had just probably left town, packed her bags, and just hightailed out of there because she couldn't take his abuse anymore. Well, nobody really knows what happened. After all, this is just rumors. But ever since that woman's disappearance, strange things would always happen around the time that that old man, Mr. Kingswood, had died. Mr. Kingswood had hung himself in the attic. And ever since the anniversary of his death, half a century ago, sometimes somebody would pass by that house, and just about at midnight, they would see a white, strange, weird white light illuminating from the attic window. And sometimes they would hear the wailing, the agonizing cries, the very tormented, broken soul of a man who took his own life, perhaps because over the guilt of committing possibly a heinous act of murder against his own beloved Felicia. But didn't the police ever investigate this disappearance? Didn't they ever take him into the station for questions? Asked Sam. Unfortunately, said Phil. There was never any concrete evidence, nor did they have a warrant to search the house. So pretty much, Mr. Kingswood walked away as a free man ever since his wife supposedly had disappeared. Supposedly, he emphasized. But nobody will ever really know what happened to that poor woman. She may have had a lot of emotional baggage, but she was a fairly decent young lady who had a lot going on for her, a lot of good things. But that man, there was something about him that was always off. It's just like he was always being tormented by something, Phil had said sharply, through staggered breath. I know what you must be thinking, kid. A lot of people would like to think that place is really haunted. But you know how some folks are. Superstitious and all that. But nobody would ever dare go within 100 yards of that place if they know what's good for them. So, if you value your life and wish to keep the skin and every hair on your body, I suggest that you stay away from that house. You understand me, son? Sam quickly nodded. Of course, sir. Good, said Phil. I don't want to see you get hurt. You're a really nice boy, and I like you more than I do most kids that are usually very snobbish and often harass me. Usually like to toilet paper my house on Halloween, but you, kid, I like you. So please promise me, you'll never go near that house. I want you to pinky promise. Sam had thought for a few minutes and did just that. He agreed not to go anywhere near the old Kingswood house. But isn't some promises meant to be broken? Later in the evening, after supper around 7 o'clock, while Sam was still alone in his new house, he sat up in his bed, curled up in a few blankets, with a flashlight, looking over some comic books, with just the night light to give him some sort of source. But somehow, something made Sam have the urge to glance up and stare out his bedroom window. And he had gotten up out of bed rather sluggishly and stood in front of his window, peering out across the street to the old Kingswood house. He looked anxious. Something washed over him. Fear, anxiety, more curiosity. It was all just eating away at him. It was overwhelming. Sam, a part of him wanted so badly just to grab his coat and get his backpack and just maybe, he could just get a closer look at that attic window. And just maybe he might see something. If he could stay up real late, perhaps he could confirm whether or not the story was actually true. Whether or not there was actually a ghost haunting that old place. But Sam remembered his promise to Phil. And you should never break a pinky promise. Even though, of course, maybe some promises are meant to be broken, but well, this was serious. After all, Phil was concerned for Sam's safety, and yet Sam was being that dumb kid that would totally forget everything that was just explained to him and brush it off as like it was nothing. And being that dumb kid, he decided the hell with it. I'm going to go check out that house. And I'm going to see what comes of it if I'm going to see a ghost that night. And that's exactly what was swimming around in his brain. His 13-year-old dumb brain, who, like most kids, just don't listen to adults. They just gonna do whatever they want, whenever they feel like it. Maybe Sam was doing it to be brave. Or maybe he was just being clueless and perhaps a bit foolish. What if there was some sort of danger in that old house? And Sam, he just wasn't aware of it. He just wasn't aware of the real potential danger that possibly could have, or maybe still does, reside there. So, about 11 o'clock, Sam had packed a few things in his backpack, some snacks, a few comics to read, and armed with his flashlight, of course, and bundled up in his gray jacket, he snuck out of his house and tiptoed across the road to the old Kingswood house. Yeah, he really truly was being totally dumb in that moment. He wondered if he should just turn back, but he knew that he just couldn't. Something was pulling him closer to that old house, and he just needed answers. He just wanted to know, was the legend of the ghost of Mr. Kingswood true? And maybe he might find some clues about what really happened to that woman who disappeared. Was she murdered, or did she just run away? Alright, this episode of my very first original ghost story will be continued in the next part. So I hope that you will like and subscribe and stay tuned for more. This is the first time I've ever really done this, and I'll admit that I had been a little bit nervous. And honestly, this was something I never really thought of doing, but I feel like I miss having to write. But my head is like the one magical place where all this creativity comes from. So I'm not really having to really always pick up a pen and a piece of paper and having to jot all this stuff down. All of this is all put into a mental note inside my brain. And I just want to be able to share my creative passions with you. So I really do hope that you guys like this story. And honestly, I wish you all a happy Halloween. And to remember to always stay spooky and always be your beautiful self. Until next time, I'm FandomTraveller87. And thank you so much for watching and listening to my story. It means a lot to me. Those likes would be really appreciated. And again, this was the first time I decided to do this, and I just figured it was something I would try out. Well, anyway, it is late for me where I'm at, so I wish you all a wonderful evening, afternoon, or morning, wherever you are in the world. Until next time, bye-bye.